Okay, well, I'm very happy to be joined today by Eoin Bailey, who's the UK Innovation Manager at Celsa Steel. Now, that alone would definitely make him a candidate for me trying to have a podcast episode with. But one of the reasons that I asked if he would have a conversation is he's been, a really interesting point of contact about whether the focus on decarbonisation is really the right point or not. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But before we go into that, Owen, could you just give a little bit of background about how you have found yourself in the hard to abate sectors? Because you came from a design and innovation background. So maybe you could just tell a little more about that, please.
I suppose my career started as a design engineer, mainly in the automotive industry, designing cars and car components, working for different car manufacturers and suppliers. And while doing that, I realised that the decisions I was making at the design stage had a kind of a fairly long-term impact on what and how a car was being treated, and ultimately what happens to a vehicle at the end of life, and also how we define the challenges and impacts of what we do is all kind of defined at that design stage. And so I managed to do some research while I was working for a speaker manufacturer many years ago, and was able to get some funding to allow me to take a step away from my day job. And while doing so, I was able to assess the entire life cycle of that product, and realize that there's massive contradictions and risks and impacts of what we're doing and how we're doing it across the entire life cycle of that product. And it made me realize that if that is the case for one product, it's the case for every single product and every single aspect of human society, at least in Western society. And I felt there was a better way of doing things, and ultimately, if we can design in impact and contradictions and wastes and emissions and so on, we can certainly design those out. And really, since then, I've always assumed that waste is just bad design, and ultimately we can, as a society, we can do things in a very different way, in a more progressive way forward. So and from that, really, I started exploring the concepts and philosophies of the circular economy, of cradle to cradle, eco-design, biomimicry, all these different things and different philosophies that really offer an opportunity for industry and society to do things better. So my career, I suppose, evolved from that point onwards, and yeah, I get very excited about designing whole systems and not just designing the widgets that we utilize within those systems. Celsa sees themselves as a solution provider for this whole concept of circularity, and in essence, they are already delivering solutions around circularity, because Celsa is a steel manufacturer, but we in the UK in particular, we produce over 1 million tons of product for the construction sector and engineering sectors. But we do so in the process of recycling end-of-life scrap materials. So scrap coming from all sorts of industries, including construction industry, is utilized. We use about 1.2 million tons of scrap material into our process. We use an electric arc furnace to melt that down, and then ultimately we add value back into the local and UK economy by reintroducing that recycled steel back into the industry, into the economy again. So in essence, what Celsa has been doing since the 1960s is delivering circular economy solutions. The space in which I work now and what I'm doing is to help them introduce the concept of innovation into the overall process to make it more efficient, but also to encourage the company to understand that the circular economy is not just about recycling. It's about a much wider scope of opportunities that any organization, including Celsa, can deliver solutions for circularity that will provide opportunities for them that scope way beyond the traditional concept of the linear economy, which is all built to a point that we get, as a business, we get paid as soon as we exchange our product for cash. So with the circular economy, it opens that scope up, and there's a lot more value and values that can be delivered. And ultimately, Celsa as a business is in a position to be able to not only satisfy their own agenda towards sustainability and resource efficiency, but also to support that initiative across regions, across sectors, and across government. government policy as well.
So, I mean, obviously, Celsa starts from a slightly different point than perhaps other companies do, who are perhaps developing product from real kind of raw materials upwards. So they already have that position of being part of a recycled value chain. But for the purposes of this podcast, we're not talking specifically about Celso. We're going to talk a little bit more about why, I suppose, well, let's come back to when you and I got in touch and I was saying, I'm doing this business and it's all about decarbonisation for hard to abate. I know that you had quite a firm view on that, which was that actually decarbonisation as a singular focus in many ways enables ongoing waste within the linear economy. I wonder if you can expand on that a bit, because I'm not going to lie, it did take me a little while of mulling that over to really understand what you were getting at. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, sure. If we think, obviously, that I'm very much about the circular economy as a solution for lots of different opportunities and to address a lot of the main challenges we have around climate change and efficiency across industries. But I suppose you have to think about the counter to the circular economy is the linear economy. And linear economy is what we as particularly in Western society have been so used to for a long time, and for it's about 3.6 million years old. The linear economy, in terms of as soon as humanity started digging raw materials, whether using stones or wood to make tools or weapons to go hunting with, that in essence is the linear economy. And that thinking, that philosophy of taking resources, utilizing resources, and chucking those resources away at the end of life, that still exists now. And what we've become is a society that have become very, very good at extracting more and more materials, being more and more efficient with the extraction of those materials, but we're still getting rid of those materials at the end of life. And because, again, that combined view that the only perceived value with all those materials is when we exchange those materials or those services for cash, for money, and the single focus is the money. We lose sight of all the other impacts that happens and exists around that single-minded focus. And in that sense, we don't think about how other aspects and other opportunities can solve the problems around us. If we look at carbon capture and storage in the same context as we look at recycling or waste management, we're just reacting to the impact of a linear economy and not designing solutions in that prevent us from producing those issues in the first place. So this is what I refer to in terms of the challenges around decarbonisation generally. If we're going to approach the solutions that we need for decarbonisation in the same way as we created the problems in the first place, then we're never really going to achieve anything positive. So the whole idea of looking at circularity and systems thinking to the problem and therefore to the solutions, that we can start to develop solutions in businesses and economies and service business models and ultimately societies based upon higher levels of understanding, and therefore we can deliver solutions that can have a multiple of impacts that aren't necessarily just about the decarbonisation aspects in which we could consider it now. If we and the other thing which kind of brought me onto this as well is that part of my research with the speaker manufacturer was into the different use of materials, like things like neodymium, which is an element used in the manufacture of magnets, which is used in motors, and motors are a major part of electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and a lot of other technologies that are based around this low carbon technology revolution. The challenge I have with all of this is that we're still looking to deliver solutions based upon that linear thinking, that linear approach to extraction and end of life. So no matter how efficient all of these products and devices are in use, we're still not addressing the problems and issues with the sourcing of those resources or the end of life challenges around resource recovery or utilization. And we're certainly not addressing the impacts that those ends of the supply chain have on the planet. And so, as much as I think the technology we're developing is fantastic, the philosophy in which we're developing them is still flawed. And I think we need to understand the overall system's impact and approaches in a better way to be able to really deliver proper, robust solutions.
What's the impact of continuing in the way that we are? What is the problem that those people with quite sort of very specific engineering minds focused on engineering problems? Why should this matter?
What I've always said is designers and design engineers are problem solvers, and so if you present a problem to them, they will solve that problem in whatever way, form, or shape that they wish to do it. Where we need to change is the scope and the specification of that problem. And ultimately, within a linear economy, we're very, very focused on that single point of contact, the single point of value, which is the point of sale. And that is, everything is based around that. However, if we look at the values that exist around the circular economy and we take those blinkers off, or at least we extend those blinkers out, we can see so much more in terms of value and opportunity, and so much more opportunity to make money in many different ways. And I think if you provide engineers and solution providers with that broad level of scope, they can start to look at many more opportunities that can actually deliver real financial value and not just a single-minded, single focus. And it's also about what I've always said is that no single organization can deliver the circular economy in isolation. They have to be able to collaborate. And I think one of the traits of a linear economy is siloed working. So we're very much focused on what our job is and how we deliver our job. The circular economy encourages collaboration, so it means that actually let's collaborate with the people around us, with the different people in our supply chain, and let's come together to develop solutions which are financially viable. And ultimately, the consequence is that we reduce our environmental impact, or even eliminate our environmental impact, and therefore limit the risks associated with linear focus. So it's not just a case, the way I see it, it's not just a case that the circular economy is too complex for people to think of solutions. It's just that we're still trying to think of circular economy with the mindset of a linear economy. So if we can take those blinkers off and explore the ideas and the opportunities around collaboration, then we can design these solutions and develop these business models which are much more profitable, which are much more resource efficient, and ultimately, if you think about all the impacts in terms of waste management, in terms of emissions, in terms of lack of efficiency around energy use or electricity use, so on. These are all costly actions, and they're costing a business money. So if we're able to collaborate to eliminate those impacts, it's going to save the business money. So there's so many different opportunities, so many more opportunities that can be recovered or available within circular thinking and therein developing circular solutions.
Could you just give an example, even if it's overly simplified, we'll accept it is. If you were talking whether it's steel or any other common product, what's the difference, what's the difference between the linear economy version for that business versus what a circular economy model might look like?
Well, in fact, I can do better than that. I can actually point people in the direction of a business that's actually doing this now, and I would ask people to check out River Simple as a business. And River Simple is based in Mid Wales, and River Simple is a company that is designing and developing a vehicle. What they're doing is designing and developing a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, which is very lightweight, which is predominantly going to be used in regional situations or even rural situations. So it's very focused on its environment for its use. It's a lightweight vehicle because they're using carbon fiber and lots of different lightweight materials. It's a hydrogen fuel cell. The fuel cell itself is generating power and driving electricity into the capacitors, and those capacitors are driving motors in each wheel. Then the motors under braking will regenerate back into the capacitors again, so therefore the energy efficiency throughout the whole system is phenomenal. But the really interesting thing gets into the business model. So these guys are manufacturing these cars, but they're never going to sell a car. They're only going to provide the car as a service to its users. They're looking at mobility as a service throughout what they're delivering, and so therefore you become subscription. You pay for subscription of the use, pay by the mile, pay by the use, And so therefore what happens is that included in your subscription is all your mileage, all your fuel, your tires, your insurance, your tax, anything that, so you just pay a flat rate every time you use it. Now, the reason they're doing this is that by doing so, they retain ownership of the vehicle itself. So they can then design in technology, they can design in longevity into the process, because they know as long as the car is being used, they get value for that car. So effectively, they get paid every single mile that car is driven. And so therefore, over the lifetime of the vehicle, they get paid every day. They don't get paid once at the point of sale. They get paid every single day. But the real interesting elements come into it when it comes to the end of life. So they've designed this car that at the end of life, it can be disassembled and recovered, and all those resources and materials can be recovered to provide the material resource for the next generation of vehicle. So you start to look at circularity across the entire life cycle, and you get paid every single day of that life cycle. And then ultimately you get paid multiple life cycles for the same bit of resource. So you're not continually digging up raw materials, processing it and delivering and selling it that one time to have to do it again and again and again. You effectively have multiple opportunities for over multiple life cycles to get paid at every single stage. Now, the other interesting element of what Riversimple are doing is they're this whole idea of a service business model. They're also linking with their entire supply chain. So they don't purchase motors from their supply chain, from their tier supply chain. They've embedded their suppliers into this service business model. So what happens is Riversimple leases the motors from their suppliers, which means that the suppliers have a vested interest in designing for longevity, in designing for service, in designing for a point in which that if anything is, well, durability is one thing, but if anything does go wrong with the components, they can take them back and replace them and retrofit and so on and so forth. So because they always have control, because they don't relinquish control by selling anything. They just provide the product as part of a service, and they become service providers for mobility. So what they're doing and the direction they're going in is really, I feel, a benchmark for most organizations. And if organizations can take even an element or some elements of the business that Riversimple are developing, and apply it in their own context, then we're all in a much better position going forward. So yeah, in terms of encompassing all of this philosophy, I think Riversimple are the one business I feel at this stage. There's many more, but there's in terms of doing it, but the one business that is close to hand to demonstrate. Any organization can start this journey forward by asking questions of what they do, asking questions, simple questions about what their business model is, where do their resources come from, as in what's their supply chain doing, what impact does the business and their supply chain have on the planet, on society, and on economics even. And ultimately, if you're in a position to ask these difficult questions and listen to the difficult answers you might be getting, and basically rather than arguing or fighting against these answers, actually take these answers on board and try to therefore look at elements within your own operations, how you can deliver solutions, or at least develop solutions, which can start to reduce your impact, mitigate your risks, and ultimately, therefore, you start to develop new solutions that can provide lots more opportunities. And on the basis of this baseline study that I would ask any organization to do, is start to understand who your supply chain is and see if you can have open conversations with your customers, with your suppliers, and how you can come together and develop collaborative solutions along these lines. So there's things you can do straight away.
You can almost hear out in the ether loads of disruptors going, well, that's exactly how I'm looking, and that's what we want to do. And it's kind of, to some extent, easier to do when you are a disruptor coming new to market and you can redesign everything from scratch. Doesn't mean it's difficult for other companies, it's not impossible, but it's definitely easier when you're starting your product and your value chain from scratch. So how does an incumbent industrial, because of course my focus, our world and Decarbonect is the industrials, where do they start? And you mentioned a few of the questions, but how do we make it possible for them to find this kind of business model, next gen business model?
Well, I think, and the questions I referred to earlier are the ones that it's for established businesses to start asking those questions, because obviously you have answers to be able to come back to you. You have data related to those answers as well. I think it's when you start collating all that information that you might get from what's your supply chain? Where do your resources come from? And that across that supply chain, and really kind of walk the supply chain. Ask really difficult questions of your suppliers and finding out really down to the nitty gritty of what happens. Because ultimately, businesses at the moment are purely interested in getting resources in. They don't care necessarily where it comes from, as long as it's cost effective to do so. And they don't as soon as they sell something, they don't really care where it goes to after that. So really, you need to look at the full life cycle of what you do as a business and ask those questions. And you can do that. It's then kind of moving forward in terms of also asking questions about what directives, what standards, what initiatives from government policy, and how that might affect your business going forward. What future initiatives are coming from government. Once you have all that information together, then you'll start to see elements and pick out elements that can present opportunities, particularly if you're having these conversations with your supply chain, and start looking at and your customers, and start finding out what, from their point of view, what are the challenges they face day to day. Because really, it's more often it's about having that discussion, that open discussion, giving people time to offload their challenges, their issues, their aches and pains from day-to-day operations, and how then you as a business can look at what you do and help them deliver on their challenges. And these are all ways I think that current business can actually deliver solutions and ultimately start to transition towards a more circular narrative and a more circular approach to what they do, and therefore start to decarbonize their entire operations and ultimately be able to decarbonize their markets, their sectors, and what it is they provide. Because there's also the opportunity, and this is something we're exploring from steel, is that Celsa as a business, we're a steel manufacturer, but we're also a significant processor of scrap, of metal. And so there's no reason why we can't offer what we do as a service to our customers and to other industries to say, well, look, if you want to give us some steel, we can help you process that, and that will start looking at resource efficiency, decarbonization, and provide you steel back into your next build, your next generation of products. So we just become service providers for this whole idea of circular steel. But that, again, that is a concept that can be reflected and scaled up in other areas and other businesses and other sectors for other materials.
Some of the kind of very early stage circular models that I've seen, for example, I know there's sort of work going on in plastics. Is there anything else that you're seeing again in those hard to abate sectors that you think are signs of early moves into this that people should be aware of?
Well, if I just, I suppose, add my two pennies worth for the idea of plastics and the big plastic problem we have. And in fact, a student contacted me on LinkedIn recently and asked that same question. And my response really, and it's not a unique response, but plastics aren't our problem. We're the problem. Our utilization and our understanding of that supply chain is the problem. Our understanding of and it's a cultural issue more than anything else, that we assume that single-use plastics are a throwaway item, and that is developed over the 50s and 60s in terms of convenience and very much an American-driven marketing initiative where we start looking at convenience in the home and so on. The throwaway is how we want to live our lives, and so it's people are the issue, not plastic. Plastics is a phenomenal material. Polymers are phenomenal materials, and we wouldn't have a modern society without them. It's just we need to understand the entire life cycle of each element of plastic, and industry needs to take responsibility of what happens. And again, this is the plastic problem we see at the moment, and plastic in our oceans is a product of the linear economy, because of the siloed nature of what we do and how we view things, and the only assumed value is at that point of sale. Manufacturers and producers of materials need to understand how the industry can collaborate to develop solutions to make sure that plastic never goes back in, never mixes with the natural environment. Because within circular economy, there's two elements of metabolism. So there's the biological metabolism and the technical metabolism. And in a biological metabolism, we talk about nature. And in nature, there's no such thing as waste. It's just food for new life. So by reflecting that into a technical area, there is no waste. It's feedstock for new development. So what we need to make sure is that those two don't ever mix, and that when we start talking about technical materials, those technical materials go back into to form the next generation of product or technical material or packaging or whatever the case would be. So it's how we design and develop the systems to allow that to happen more efficiently and effectively. And then the narrative in terms of telling the story of to our users, to the users of our products, to our customers, that this is what we want you to do and how we want you to do it as well. So it's about that joined up approach, that systems solution that can be available through circular thinking. And ultimately, we need to treat the materials we have, the resources we have, much more responsibly, and not be a culture which thinks that throwaway is acceptable, because it isn't. There's no such thing as a waste.
I think there's sort of two interesting strands here that live neatly alongside each other. Though there is the we shouldn't be that kind of society because it's not a great way to live. But at the same time, it's also coming back to your point that that sort of wastage represents inefficiency, which represents lost opportunity for pragmatists out in the world. That those two drivers are important.
And that's what I feel that for me that's what the circular economy offers is yes, it kind of gives you an opportunity to realize, okay, I've been bad, but also it gives me an opportunity. Wow, so many more opportunities. I can deliver so much business I can actually develop, and so much more money I can make by looking at this, and because it just opens up. And I think I wrote in an article recently that it just liberates. It liberates design, it liberates materials, it liberates creativity, and it certainly liberates business and the economy. And I think the more we see this, and the more people start to understand that this whole idea of circularity and the principles that it brings to the fore, can leave us in a much better position, both in terms of our financial situation, but also in terms of and I think the happy consequence of a circular economy is we eliminate our impact on the environment. We start to develop a more socially aware and socially equal society, and it starts to embed the principles that in Wales are around the Future Generations Act, start to look and secure the well-being for future generations.
Owen, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me. Yeah, I really appreciated your help during the research phase, because it was the start, I think the starting point for me to understand that there's a lot more than just, I mean, I still see the meat in decarbonisation, obviously, but I think there's so much more that certainly we as a business can contribute to, but also just so much more to explore and to look at. Anyway, thank you again. It was a great conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.